Welcome, everybody. It is 7:30 on Thursday night Central Time Zone, which means it is time once again for cinematic conversations. And tonight, I hope all of you have had the opportunity to watch Nomadland, which is an amazing film, which we will talk about. But our guest tonight is Tiffany Vollmer. And Tiffany now is the president of Women in Film Dallas. Let me just sort of briefly tell you a little bit about her. Tiffany has been working in the film and entertainment business for 25 years. Hey, I've been doing it for at least that long, but 25 years is a long time. She produced her first film in 2007. She has done makeup and wardrobe and first AD and casting, and she's done a job that I've never heard of. So, Tiffany, what is a wig swing?
So basically on Broadway backstage during the really hectic months like Christmas and whatnot, even if you're not a unionized hair person, but because of my experience doing wigs for the opera at University of North Texas and working with some of the best wigs that come out of the LA Opera, I was invited to go work backstage on Moving Out, the Tony Award winning Broadway musical
Mhm.
for the winter months during Christmas while one of their other regular stylists was out. So that's in the industry, in the union, that's what they call a swing. You get to swing in, and then when that person comes back, you get to swing right out again, which is great because I did realize as much as I love hair and as much as I love musical theater, I do not want to stand behind the same head of hair for 8 shows a week, for years and years and years and years. I have to bounce. I'm too ADD for that.
So
So I need to be designing things.
it's sort of like the Amazon job, right? You kind of swing in and swing out.
Swing in. Exactly. It's so apropos to the film that we watched this week.
But you're also the voice of Bulma on the Dragon Ball series. So tell me about Bulma.
So Bulma was my first audition out of college. And actually, I didn't actually quite make it out of college because I failed my math class. People always say, how did you get into anime? And I always say, I failed my math class. I was on acting scholarship. And so I knew if I took math, I might lose my scholarship in case I failed it. So I took it my very last semester and I was geared up to move to LA and go to a makeup school out there and try to make it on the big screen. And I did not make it through that math class. So I had to stay in class for one more semester. And I ran into Chris Abbott, who's the director of the Dragon Ball series with Funimation. He and I had known each other because I designed makeup for the operas. He'd heard me sing, he'd seen me perform, and he said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, well, apparently I'm going to be in school for a little bit because I failed my math class. And he said, you should come audition for the show that I'm directing in Fort Worth. And I did, and I got the main female role. So it kept me in Dallas for 10 years, working with Funimation, playing this very strong, empowered female for Japanese anime.
So do you want to talk a little bit about Women in Film and what you do as president of Women in Film?
I keep plates in the air and keep them from hitting the ground. No. Women in film is very dear to me. I grew up in Dallas and then I moved away to New Orleans. And when I came back to Dallas 2 years ago, I immediately jumped into Women in Film. And it was just like a sisterhood. Like everybody was so inviting and people were working on all these great projects. And, living in New Orleans, I actually lived in a kind of a communal type situation, an art studio where every time I stepped out my door, there was somebody creating like sculptures or costumes or wigs. And we did makeup and, floats for parades and whatnot. So when I came to Dallas, I was really craving that creativity and another group of like minds and people that I could be around and be like, okay, you're doing something great too. Now it's not in stepping outside your front door. Dallas is a really big city. So I did feel very embraced and I just really fell in love with the idea of mentoring, empowering, and inspiring other women. And so after my first year, I was invited to serve on the board as the membership chair, and then COVID. And even during COVID, our membership suffered quite a bit. And I myself fell ill with COVID. I was very ill for about 35 days in
Oh,
isolation.
mm,
Really struggled. I still lose hearing in my left ear from
oh,
COVID, that it comes in and out intermittently. But I got an outpouring of love, and the board of directors for Women in Film really supported me, and they just constantly checking. I mean, it was just community that I really, feeling a fish out of water back in Dallas after being gone so long. These people just came together and really lifted me up. So when when we had elections coming up and it was suggested that maybe I run for president, I just felt very passionate about carrying the momentum forward
mhm.
and always giving back to the people that were really there for me in a rough spot. So I'm taking the skills that I have been given. They would, you know, I've been blessed with some organizational skills. It's not called OCD, it's called organizational skills. And
Okay.
I'm here to carry the torch and provide for this organization that's been going 37 years strong, and create work for women in the film industry is the bottom line. That's our main goal, but also create that sisterhood and you know empower all women. It's not just filmmakers. It's lucky that that's our job and that's what
Mm.
we get to do. But it's really for equality and equal pay, and getting the jobs, and making sure that our faces are out there and the work that we are doing is out there so people can appreciate the female filmmakers.
Mm.
So
So let's start to talk about the films. What was your first impression when the film ends? She she goes and sees her home. She walks out into the desert and walks out of frame. How did you feel? How did the whole film experience sort of affect you emotionally?
just even saying those words, I have goosebumps over every single part of my body. um I feel like as women, we have a tendency to, if we're too strong, that's a weakness. If we're a mess, that's a weakness. Like there is no real navigation on how, you're either batshit crazy or you're, suppressing your issues.
Hmm.
So I feel like that last moment when she walks away is, it doesn't matter what she does next. She's doing what lifts her spirit and makes her feel free.
Yeah, and throughout the film, you sort of, what makes her feel valued, feel good, and feel free. And it's mostly to me, when I'm thinking back at it, the moments when she's just walking in the landscape and just sort of yelling her name and sort of standing by the sea or wherever she is, where she's just in the world by herself, is her really true happy place.
I even love it as she's walking past the campfire and they're all trying to include her. And
Mm,
she's like, no, I got this. I'm just going to go on a walk. And in my filmmaker mind, I'm like, you know, maybe that was a moment that wasn't planned where they're just like, hey, come, we've been hanging out. We went to we had dinner together. We know that you're the star, but come join us by the campfire. And she may be off script, just said, oh no, I'm just gonna walk over here. And maybe it was just a moment the camera captured. Like it just was so authentic and not scripted, it felt.
I think I mean, the first time I thought that, the second time I looked at the shot and it looked like the camera looked like it knew where it was going.
It
And
did. It was going. Yeah, I agree. It was following. So, but that was also my other thing. I'm like, did they call her over and she's really just supposed to be going over there? So she ad libbed that line and felt like she was going where the camera wanted her to go. Either way, it was a great moment and it felt authentic and I loved it.
I mean, I think in a sense, all the way through the film, she gives well, she gives an amazing performance that even though these are not feelings that I might have, it's clearly authentic and they resonate very deeply. And it's the often it's like when you think of a film and you think of a script, it's story elements. This happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. But to me, the great power in this film is less the events and more of the moments when she's just lying in the van or opening up a can of beans or
Mhm.
gluing together the pieces of the plate. It's like these are not narrative beats, they're performance of who she is and sort of letting us observe the sense of her life that I think brings power to this film.
I agree, and I mean, it's such a dream. I felt like I was experiencing everything with her for the first time. I would
Mm.
love to have that, not forced reality of, you know, I'll give you an example. When Moulin Rouge came out, I was doing an event that night for the USA Film Festival and actually performing as a can girl in the publicity photos with Boz Luhrmann, right? So I got to meet Boz, and my filmmaker friends were like, "You're the only one that can get close to him, to tell him anything. So tell him that we really appreciate him coming to Dallas." So I missed being able to see the movie that night during the premiere, and a filmmaker friend of mine said, "I'm going to take you to see that movie, not because I want to see it again, because I want to see you when you watch that film for the very first time." And I feel in a lot of ways that's what we did with Frances, is we got to see her kind of experience her journey as this character for the very first time.
Right. You get to see her along with those moments and feel those moments um, bit by bit. Times when she's happy and times when she's not. Do you want to talk about from you, all of the many jobs that you've had in the film business, from makeup to hair to AD to casting? The kind of things that you see in this film that we may not. Let's start with the hair and the makeup. What did you see in terms, because normally in a feature film with a major film star, like you would want to make them look really good, right?
Yes, and really, this film was about, let's knock off the shine if it's not appropriate in this place. In the haircuts, I kind of wish that we would have seen Frances McDormand go through a little bit more of a transition, when as from like before she got into the van, and then, well, I guess she was already in the van at the beginning of the movie.
Well, at
But
the very beginning, she gives up everything and then gets in the van seemingly for the first time.
right, it makes sense for someone who's been in a van for a while to do just the pull up and cut haircut thing.
Mhm.
So I maybe personally would have maybe wanted to see that, a little bit of that transition in the design of her hairs, this
Mhm.
before and then this now thing. Um, because we saw that in the patient, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the character, the one that was going through cancer. Um, while she's giving this haircut, this
Yeah.
is that was very symbolic. So um,
And with her, at least we when she sees, the two kids and her friend, they say, "Oh, you cut your hair." So clearly she had longer hair before.
right, I would like to have seen that. Um, but other than that, I mean, I'm not a critic at all. I think the natural everything looking the way that it was very appropriate for nothing. The thing about makeup is when something sticks out as, oh, that's not right, that's when it's a problem. But I felt like everything was just beautifully done and authentic. And I would like to go back and investigate a little bit more on the process and see, did they have the honey wagons out there, and trailers of makeup, and or did they just have somebody standing there on set powdering people and creating a look once a day, which is just for the look for camera. So that's definitely something I want to get back into. I mean, look further and deeper into that aspect.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering myself is, she in a nice trailer and then going out there, or she's sort of amongst the people um as she's working that. And it was not.
Especially now with HD cameras, right? Like it gets all the weathering and all the wrinkles and all of the, her face
Yeah.
in particular as an actress. It's not that smooth, airbrushed, celluloid, fuzzy, great cinematography look. She is a real person that has worked those jobs, that has worked those hours,
Mhm.
and is a, for lack of a better, I mean, it's maybe what I assume is that she's a blue collar worker, basically. And, her, she doesn't look like she's been sitting in a salon for, for what that's worth. So I thought it was great. I thought it helped her acting more than anything because the subtleties in her face and her expressions and every character line that she has earned in her career was so impactful in this role and in this performance and with all these extreme close-ups. I feel like it had to be, that look and not anything more than that for her character.
So Raquel is saying the cinematographer Joshua James Richard, who has shot her previous films as well, has an answer for that. He helped his partner and collaborator director Chloé Zhao. Um, love that scene. Mostly see the reverse female partners helping the male directors. Um, yeah, I mean, the cinematography also is pretty stunning. And one of the things to think about that is, I assumed we all watched this on a television or a computer screen.
Yep.
And this was a film that I felt this both times when I watched it, that would have been really good to have seen on a large screen. That I think that
Agreed. Oh my gosh. All of those big beauty shots of the world. I mean, yeah. I mean, they just got trimmed down for sure.
I mean, it's still a very good and strong experience, but I think I think on a large screen it really would have been better. And I think Chloe did an incredible job directing this, and it's really kind of an amazing thing that this is just her third feature film, and she gets to work
Right.
with an incredibly amazing star.
I feel too, though, that all of her projects before this kind of led up to this experience.
Hmm.
And she has a fascination with the Western, the Wild West here in the United States. And it's clear, like from Ryder, my father was a cowboy as a young man. He was a bull rider, he was a stunt rider in Bus Stop and in Giant. And, I've always had a mystique and a love for, that Wild West, that country cowboy thing. And she captures it so well with the big skies and
Hmm.
the campfires and, the motion of the horses running and, the, yeah, it's just, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
And in both of her previous films, indeed, she has this sense of shooting people where they are, but
Landscape.
connected to their environment and to their landscape, right? And there's a kind of dignity that our characters show, which clearly is the same here. And people that are not in the best situation, not awful, but and they deal with family and sort of issues. So there's sort of like a lot of the major visual stylistic elements of this film are in the other films, and the way that she approaches character.
And I
So
can say that really helped her budget because you were talking to me as all the other hats that I wear, definitely produce things myself. And from an AD standpoint, one of the biggest logistical projects I ever worked on was a show called Pink's All Out on the Speed Channel, where we raced for pink slips. It was a drag racing show. And for the All Out show, we were getting, 500 cars through getting their inspections, and it was just a lot of moving parts, and then the safety, and then the show cars that went in between. It was like this huge production, and then having to move the entire um, operation to the next town, right?
Right.
So I mean, their budget was really about housing people and moving from location to location. And I guess I want to say, well, they did the film for like what, 5 million, which is, and they shot a year, but they shot it all together. I think it was like 5 months to show the whole, and it was intermittently because, of course, she's directing Eternals for
Right.
Marvel right now. So she'd be in the West, like living out in, hotels or whatever. And then she would go work on her Marvel movie, which is
Right.
just mind boggling that you can switch gears that quickly.
Right.
And
Two
basically just
different,
coming
completely different universes, literally.
literally, yes. So I mean, even that alone, from a production standpoint, I applaud her. There needs to be an award for the juggling act that happens behind the scenes, especially when you're working on multiple projects. Um,
And just think about the difference of those universes. I mean, literally, in this film, almost all of your people in the film are real people in real places. And
the wardrobe is easy peasy, and now she's designing superhero, or just approving, superhero costumes, and
yeah,
the look of these iconic characters that the Marvel world will be very upset if you don't get it right? And then
yeah.
she goes back into this whole other world that is completely, yeah.
And in a Marvel film, a lot of the times you're dealing with a lot of visual effects. So it's like nothing is real. That moment that you are constructing is a construct.
All of her strengths, which are I mean, a lot of, not all of
Right.
them, a lot of her strength, which is she'll get to see storyboards and maybe some digital images, but unless they're shooting it like the Mandalorian, until you like really shoot some of that stuff, you're not going to even really get the gist of what that backdrop looks like. I
Right.
can't
But
imagine
you don't have the
really that
visceral
hard.
sense of the space that you're in when you're
Right.
working with somebody. And with her, the background is so clearly important. And so last week we showed Bicycle Thieves and we talked about that, and 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 there famously they worked with non-actors, like they were all non-actors. Um,
Right.
as a producer and as an AD, what are the problems in working with non-actors? Because here there's so many of the very important roles are held by non-actors.
Right. There's a lot, actually. First of all, it's how do you get somebody to perform next to someone that is so incredibly famous that they feel comfortable enough and relaxed enough to be themselves and tell their story, especially when it's a traumatic story to tell, and not be aware of that camera, right? I mean, did reality television casting forever, and the people that really want to be on camera
Yeah.
will do anything to get on camera. But these people have made a decision to kind of leave the world and be, anonymous for, as far as they don't have to tell their story to anybody unless they decide to. So setting up the trust between a real person, and then also sifting through all the stories and finding the story that's appropriate
Mm.
for the film, that doesn't take the film in a completely different direction or make you wonder what happened to that person after you heard that little tidbit of their story. You can't care too much about that person that you're not willing to go back and follow your lead on that journey as to where they're going. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I think, one of the great things here is that Frances is not an intimidating actress. You know,
no.
she's not like somebody who's
Well,
somebody,
that's what we think. I
yeah.
mean,
I,
we don't know about how these other people felt, but I'm assuming so.
right. She
I
just
think it's
doesn't
very
carry
accommodating.
herself that way.
Right.
And so I think it's a little easier to work with her than say Meryl Streep, which could be very intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then it's like with what's his name, Bob, the older gentleman who sort of runs the place. I
Mhm.
mean, he had a very dramatic scene. I mean, that is, telling the story of the suicide of your son, and that line where he says, and I have trouble finishing that sentence.
Right.
I mean, that is such a powerful thing, which may be real. I assume it would be at this
Oh, yeah,
point.
I think that was definitely his truth for sure.
Sure. But to tell that over and over again, because I'm sure they did more than one take, it's got to be a very difficult thing. And to be able to do it in a way that you can cut it, that has, I mean, that's why you
Right.
have professional actors, because they can do the
I would be
standard.
interested to hear, I would be interested to actually, that's kind of a dorky nerd film thing that I would do, is to find out how many takes that scene took, because maybe the first time he completely fell apart and couldn't get through it, right? And then maybe the acting lesson was happening on set, and the trust was happening on set, and that's why, and that was the take that worked.
Mm.
Or was it a one take wonder? I mean, I would love to, really find out what the process was for that, for
And
that
that also
scene.
brings me to another thing that's truly unusual about this film, is it not only was directed and written and produced, co-produced, and it's all these things, but she also edited this. And how many
Oh,
directors will want to edit their material? I mean,
I
that is
find
such a rarity.
I can't even believe that it's doable. I've worked with so many people that, even in music, people that I've worked with that are so attached to their project, they try to produce it as well. And I'm like, you need a fresh set of ears. You are not getting anywhere further with this project because you keep listening to it over and over and over and over and over again. Like,
Yeah.
how can you be objective? But there's she just has some skills, man. I mean, she's an anomaly, clearly. Um,
But I
I
also think that if she knew that she was going to be editing this while she was shooting and
Yeah,
working with
that's very
non-actors,
helpful. It's very helpful.
it gives you a sense of when you it's like when you know you have a take that you like, and you
You
know
can
you
just
don't want
move
to.
forward. You can just
Right.
move forward, and you don't have to butcher that person and break them down to the nth degree to where they feel completely, hopeless.
So Raquel wrote a note about, what did everybody think about the scene with the dog? It's a brave scene to see someone turn down a stray dog, which could have been so heartwarming, but I took it as a reluctance to get attached. Again, I saw this as mostly a film about grief. And yes, Raquel, it's a very astute observation. Both times when I watched the film, that scene was incredibly, incredibly powerful.
Right. And, there is a thing with, travelers, from being in New Orleans, a lot of the kids that traveled or hopped, train cars or whatnot, they would have a dog with them, which a lot of times was not only for companionship, but also because it would keep them from getting arrested
Mhm.
in certain places, which we saw her being asked to move and whatnot. But another thing, though, about that is that I realized this the second time around too. The name of her van is Vanguard,
Mhm.
which means that she has up a guard.
Yes.
And if she were to let that dog in, that would go against what she's trying to do out there, at least in the beginning. You know what I mean? She has a guard up. She named her van Vanguard. It's protecting her from hurting ever again and falling in love with anything ever again and letting herself get hurt.
And indeed, and the thing about that scene is, I remember, um, after my father had passed away, and we had a dog that passed away, and I thought, well, maybe you should get another dog. And she said she didn't want to. She just didn't want to have another thing that was going to die.
Mhm.
And I can definitely understand that. And I think that that scene, which is so sad, because that that dog would bring her happiness, and that dog's life would be much better if the dog went with her.
Both
Uh,
people are getting something, the dog and her would be getting something out of the relationship.
right. And we get to see that not happen. And it makes, it when we get to that moment, we are like very sad that for both the dog and the character.
Right. And things happen in threes sometimes in movies, and you're thinking, okay,
Magic
so,
number of cinema is 3.
right. So you're thinking, okay, well, she's not gonna, fall in love with this guy. She's not gonna take the dog. Now she's going to his house, and even though it's not a romantic thing, or it could become whatever, he's saying, here's this other thing, she says no in threes to all, like those were the three things basically that she said no to.
I mean, she said no to pretty much everything.
I mean,
uh,
it's true, but those were the big things those were the tipping points where her life could have turned back into something where she could have turned, started to love again. It could have created some roots somewhere.
yeah, and she really was avoiding it at every turn. I mean, she
Hmm.
pushed away at every moment. I mean, it was to me the saddest part was this the scene with her sister on the bed. I think was just incredibly
Oh,
powerful.
you know what though? I never came from a family like that. My family was like, you're going to get a job. You're going to, and I mean, I had some times in my 20s or 30s where I was in between gigs and I'd been traveling, and I was, living out of my Honda CRV, and my aunt would be like, well, if I wanted to send you a letter, where do I send it? And I'm like, see those license plates out there? You know what I mean? So, but my family was like, okay, you're going to get but you're not, this isn't like for real. And the fact that her sister, that just showed their relationship was so deep. And I feel like it was almost part of the reason why she had to leave again, is because this woman accepts me for all of the things, and she misses me, and maybe that's too much for me to bear right now. But again, she doesn't take the invitation to stay and be in a comfortable, loving, assured situation again.
I think I didn't quite read it that way, but I think that she just can't. I mean, in both situations, she sits in a bedroom and knows that she can stay there, that
Yeah.
she feels comfortable sleeping in her car, in her van,
Mhm.
and the idea of being domesticated, I think just is really problematic for her. When she's at that party, when she comes to her sisters, it's like she just can't deal with it. She's not particularly nice. She doesn't have nice conversation. She tells the real estate person how awful real estate is. It's like she's not at all interested in being part of a society, a nice society, saying the nice things you're supposed to say
Being
at a
cool.
barbecue.
Right, 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 right.
I mean, she's
Niceties. She's
right.
not into the niceties.
And perhaps you get the feeling that back when she was an empire and the city was good and her husband was still alive, they probably would go to those parties and she probably
Oh, I
would be
think that
nice.
they were the hospitality people. I think they had people over all the time and were
Yeah,
able to be social, and kind of the spearhead of social in their little town, you know?
yeah. And I just think that she just had moved to the place where she, in order to survive, she had to build the walls out and to be independent and free. And her freedom, like the moments, like I said, the moments were important for her is when she's out in the world and free. And then we see was it Swanky, the one who passed away and sent the footage of the bats. It's like
Yes.
and it was really sort of telling when she was saying that she's not going to die in a hospital bed. She's not going to do that. She's not going to do that. So and then she recounts the things that value to her life. And when you think about like what are the things that one generally thinks of when you think about the things you value in your life, your relationships, your kids if you have them, your parents, or maybe some sense of accomplishment, or what the things that she remembers are, being in a kayak and seeing the world of nature. They were not about other people. They were the things that she saw in the world, which
Yeah.
is really fascinating. And then that is what Fern turns into, because that's where the place where her joy comes from.
It is. It is. And you see that in her when she just, especially that scene on the right by the sea, and the shooting of that too. Talk about a logistic nightmare from an AD perspective, production perspective. They were literally having to keep that camera from falling off the side of a cliff during
Yeah.
that shot
Yeah.
because the winds were so torrent. And um but man, what a powerful, it almost felt like it was the I have made it to the end of the world kind of
Right.
kind of
Right.
feeling.
And there are a few of those. Then she gets lost in with the rocks, and
Yes, I just was so glad she got found. I was like, is this where the movie takes a really terrible turn and she's in the desert for several days? I'm glad that it didn't become that story, because that was really frightening for a minute. But
but
uh,
what's interesting about that scene is, like, why does she take off to go in there? Because she sort of wants to get away from him.
well, but she, I find this about myself as a person that likes to travel and be
Mm.
free about the world. I had an IT job for many years where I was going to just the furthest places. There wasn't a Hilton hotel or an airport, 2 to 3 hours up in the hills in Tennessee and West Virginia, all these nooks and crannies of the United States. And I would just want to I would always say, work hard, play pretty, right? And I remember working at this one place in Colorado Springs, and I was having this terrible day, and the manager at this place wasn't happy with my whatever it was that I didn't know had nothing to do with me. I was installing an IT situation. And I remember talking on the phone to my supervisor and her saying, step outside. What do you see around you? And I'm like, there's this big mountain, it's Pikes Peak, and it's really beautiful. And she's like, okay, take some deep breaths. Okay. And I did. She's like, do you feel better? And I'm like, not really. And she was like, oh, you just stand out there as long as you want to. So after this district manager person or whatever that was coming around going, you don't know what you're doing, and yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. The store manager felt really sorry for me. He was probably about 10 years, 15 years younger than I was. And he said, I want you to do me a favor. When you get off work today, I want you to drive down the main street, and the second red light or stop sign, there were no red lights, stop sign by the 7-Eleven, take a left and just keep on driving. And I promise you, you will not regret it. And I did. And it was the Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, which is these huge rock formations. And I got out of my car and I walked around and I cried a little bit, and I laughed a little bit, and I meditated a little bit. And just being that close to nature just was completely all encompassing and completely healing. Um, so yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but you came back.
I know, but here's the deal though. I'm still, pushing 50, but there may be a time in the next 20 years where I might be that chick in a van driving around looking for whatever. I mean, who knows? We don't know. We don't know what life's gonna hand us further
And
down the
now you know how to do it. You need how big of a bucket you need to
road.
get.
I do know how big of a bucket, yes. I will not be driving a Prius. I
Right.
promise.
And if your knees are bad, you need a bigger bucket. I mean, in a sense, there
Yeah.
was a kind of
I'm
how-to in
I'm
this.
gonna need the VW Bug, the new one, the electric hybrid one of those, so I can stretch my long legs out and keep my own bucket in there.
Hmm. Um, so what other scenes really moved you?
Um, let's see. Um, I think, I mean, you were talking about the bedroom scenes earlier too, and just her performance in that, and the camera angle from being kind of above and showing the
Mm.
soft linens and the soft, ambiance of the light coming through, and her just standing there extremely rigid, not falling for it. That that's one of the big images that comes to mind. Um,
So the other thing in that scene that just sticks out is, she starts off and sister gives her the money, and then they talk, and then they get to the point when she's angry at her for leaving. And, that's something that, people often don't say to their siblings in that sort of direct kind of way.
oh, mine will be like, psh, psh, you suck. Why'd you do that? But
But
I think the way that she broke it down for her, though, I think it was even more awful than if she would have said, I'm so mad at you. Why did you do that?
I'm
By
so mad at
saying,
you because you were so observant. You're the only person who could call me on my shit, and then you left.
right. But the way that she said it was more of a, I'm just really disappointed, which sometimes is more painful than just getting it out, screaming at the person and being like, I digress, we're fine, you're my sister, I love you forever. But I think it was it without having to make, without trying to make her feel shameful, being authentic, and her feelings was clearly shameful for the sister. But she had, that's another reason why she had to go. She's like, I'm not going to do this your world guilt thing, not going to do it.
And notice throughout, I mean, she talks about her father and the plates, but in no point in the film, except when she goes there, does she talk about even having a sister. It's not like she remembers when she's talking to anybody.
Right, right. And so like the slideshow,
Yeah.
the and the, oh, we haven't even talked about the music. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
The music carried the visuals of the, it just, it was simply a piano for most of it, or it was simply a piano and a violin. Like, talk about mood. I mean, that, it's like a horror story. If you turn down the dun 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 dun,
Yeah.
it just, you just looking at images, it's just a whole different situation. And I think the music, it seems like her movies have kind of a theme, a situation where they have a little bit of that, it enhances the cinematic quality of the film. But I was really moved by the music and the simplicity of it. And
Very, very, simple, effective, powerful.
when
Would say,
she sees him playing with his son and they're doing that duet on the
oh,
piano, and I think that whole going to his house. Oh, the other thing that I noticed too that I really appreciated was it was never in your face that what time of season it was. It wasn't like, oh, there's Christmas lights and jingle bells and
we did
somebody
have
dressed as
Thanksgiving.
Santa. But at the very beginning, she's singing, a Christmas song while
Yeah.
she's driving in the van. But you don't ever. It's not the hoopla of that. And
Right.
even the Thanksgiving was subtle. It wasn't like over your head.
Right.
You know,
And her annual celebration of New Year's Eve, where she has that little thing on her hair.
I think that was the most. I think that's when we really finally saw her feeling liberated in her new life, like
Yeah.
feeling a part of, I can do this. I will do this. I am doing this. I've been doing this long enough that I can now celebrate the new year in my new life.
And by myself and feel okay about it.
Right. I also
There's an
I also enjoyed the fact that they didn't beat over the head that these women were traveling alone. They touched on, you might need a, and they touched on, you can't do this. You could die out here.
yeah.
But it wasn't a main theme in the movie.
A small thing about the music, and it's something that I don't ever remember hearing. There's one point when there's the piano music going, and then you see these guys playing guitar,
Mm.
and you hear the two pieces of music simultaneously.
I love
And
that.
normally you would bring the piano music out and hear the guitar, but to hear them together, which is such a brave thing to do. And I'm sure
Yeah.
somebody at some screening or somebody came in the editing room and saying, you know, you should probably not do that. And she said, no, no, it is perfect. That's exactly what we want. But it was really kind of, okay. So from a producing point of view, how hard is it to shoot in his Amazon warehouse?
The noise level. First of all, I did a film at the Abbott beer factory in New Orleans on the North Shore. And how do you show those machines going? It's not like you just get room tone and then ADR everything. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? So I'm interested to find out if that was an actual factory, because those Amazon factories, they go 24/7. Like they've got
Yeah,
the night shift and the AM shift and then the day shift. So I'd be interested to see what I did love. I loved that like beginning meeting where they're like,
yeah.
tell me a
Safety.
safety tip, because Amazon's been in a little bit of trouble with their
Yeah,
safety
yeah.
through the past year or so. So I think that was kind of a nice nod to Amazon. I think Amazon probably insisted that,
Yeah.
or maybe nudged that, hey, can we get a little safety thing in there?
Also, I don't know if you notice this, but when she's working at Amazon and she's like walking down the aisle and talking to people, she seems not unhappy.
Right.
It's a bit of a stretch to say she's happy because she's not very much of a happy character, but for the most part, when she is working the most menial of jobs, she doesn't seem like the jobs are like, she just does it, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't complain about it, even when it's like heavy manual labor.
And
She
she
just,
was, what was the, were those potatoes that she's just, I mean,
I think they were either potatoes or rocks, but I think they were potatoes. I'm not sure.
I kind of couldn't get that. I mean, I know that there were rocks were a thing and it was part of another scenario, but yeah, I couldn't tell, but she was shoveling like nobody's business,
Picking up trash, just like, being in the
cleaning those
kitchen.
bathrooms of the
Yeah.
rest stops.
And
I
and
mean, bless them for doing, I mean, bless the people that clean the porta potties and the rest stops. Thank you.
yeah, and it does sort of give you a sense of, one of the things that films do is like, who are the people that are, when you go to a restaurant that are working there and what are their lives are like. And, we tend to think of our work as being kind of central and key. And for them, it's just a thing you do
Yeah.
to get to do the things that you want to do, which is to sort of be out into the free world. You mentioned that scene where you see him playing the piano. And to me, that's an important moment for her because, and
Yeah.
also, by the way, when she first comes to see Dave, she you notice she looks at his van and it looks like he's not going anyplace.
Flat tire.
Flat tire, not, and we already know about the flat tire. And it's like, so, but when when he plays the piano, to her, that's the symbol that he's been domesticated, that he is not leaving and going back on the road, that he is given up that part of his life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the moment when she decides that she's not going to stay there.
I think too, when he's handling the baby and he's like, you can stay too, not just longer. I've got a house in the back. Like I'm not trying to have an intimate, you know,
Mhm,
move forward relationship with you, but there are accommodations for you. I like having you around,
mhm.
trying to make it as comfortable for her as possible. And that baby just not letting him get that line out, was like, I think that was a raw take, and I think that it just made it authentic and natural. I don't know that for fact, but when he hands her the baby, I think that too is like, this is too much. Like I can't be a part of a family. I This isn't what I've signed up for, and I think that's why she kind of that was another trigger for her.
But it's interesting because you mentioned, let's say the three people that she connects to but can't fully connect to. Well, there's the two elderly women. Was it Linda May and Swanky? And
Swanky.
then her sister, and then Dave. But it seems like the two elderly women she is way more closer to.
Oh, well, for sure. I mean, those are people that have kind of at least walked half a mile in her shoes.
Yeah,
She just identifies with them. They're on, they're kind of the pioneers that did it before she even started thinking about doing it. So she had a lot to learn from them. She had to learn safety from them. She had to learn what the boundaries were of this lifestyle and this culture, and how did you get how have you gotten away with it for so long? How are you dealing with this?
right. She learned to have a spare tire, but also like in even the beginning when she's working at Amazon and they're putting the jigsaw puzzle together. I mean, that seemed like more of a moment of connection than she has with almost anybody else, where
Right.
they're able to just sit back and kind of be with each other. And with everybody else, she's keeps, well, except for those two women, she keeps a sense of distance, emotional.
Oh, like the woman that she runs into in the grocery store that's like,
Yeah.
we're worried about you, or the daughter. I thought it was really nice that they brought that younger person in, the daughter of the woman that was kind of like, I hear you're living under her, like,
Yeah.
is everything okay?
And
We're
do you
worried
still
about
remember anything I taught you?
you. Right.
Isn't that what you want your students to say when you see them 20 years from now? Do you remember everything I taught you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Will they be able to recite a line of poetry?
Give me the gift of a grip top sock. Anyway. That was for my voice class. That was their midterm, was the grip top sock poem. That is,
So what do you make with the lighter guy? The guy
oh,
she gives the lighter to.
well, I think it's very important because there is a culture of those kids, especially in New Orleans, living close to the railroad track. A lot of those kids, are, boxcar willies. They are jumping in the boxcars. And I have a friend that made a whole movie, a scripted movie actually. And while they were um, shooting it, they were jumping boxcars and getting this amazing footage of the whole United States. But there is a difference in that younger generation, you hope will grow out of it. So it seems like there might be a glimpse of hope. And, at first, it's like those fest kids, like we were talking earlier about Grateful Dead. You go from, Fish, or, any of those jam bands, shows, which I'm not gonna lie, I've done it. It's really fun. But I don't think they wanted to pollute the movie with this other generation of kids that ran away from a really good situation in Connecticut. And their parents are all worried about them, and they could have all the money in the world, but they're just going out to prove, something to themselves. And so they intentionally live in poverty with the idea that they have a place to go back to if the S really hits the fan.
But the really intriguing part of that, the second scene, the second one,
The second scene is where it comes together.
right? And of course, when she gives them the sandwich, but the key is, what does she talk to him about? What is that poem she talks to him about?
Oh, the sonnet 18, by the way,
Yeah.
which my voice students are doing sonnets this week. So it was really, I showed that scene in my voice class today, actually, at Media Tech. Um, and
It's
boy, it was a chance for Frances McDermott to really get to do some acting.
but the point is, it's about love, it's about connecting. And here
Yes.
is a person who cannot connect with much of anybody.
Really? I mean, he didn't even have a story that you wanted to stay around to get in, yeah.
And
I
and
felt like
she's
she was giving him a gift. I felt like she was giving of this unattainable thing that you think about, this is what love feels like, let me give you this gift of this poem and a memory from my wedding, is
Yeah.
really more, about as intimate as she gets with anybody
Yeah.
that's not a female in the show.
But there's a thing, it's like, there was a time when I was like hitchhiking a lot, or there are times when you run into people that you don't think you're ever going to run into again, that you
Mhm.
can tell them all kinds of things that you wouldn't tell anybody else because you'll run into them
You'll
again.
never see him down the road, but she
Like
saw him down the road.
sometimes when you go on a plane, you just talk to somebody next to you, and then sometimes you don't want to hear what the person talking next to you wants to say. But that's another story. Uh, so so what do we take from this film? What is it that we as viewers take that we can bring to our lives and bring a deeper resonance to it?
um Buy a van.
By a vanguard, be ahead
Buy
of everybody else.
Vanguard. And what was the other name of the van? It was so cute. I had a van when I had my daughter in New Orleans. I rode bikes. My husband and I rode bikes everywhere. And we had to buy a van so that we could, drive to the hospital and have this baby. And I named her Vivian von Vandergo, right? Because it's a sexy name for a van. Um, but the other one was paint, because paint is where I ain't. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, so everybody should have a paint or a Vivian von Vandergo. No, I'm kidding. I joke, but I think it is that everybody's freedom looks a little different.
I think that's a very important thing, that that we can't really judge somebody else's sense of what they want. Everybody else wants to tell her what to do. You know, the kids and the woman at the store want to tell her what to do. Her sister wants to tell her what to do. Dave wants to tell her what to do.
Well, and
Uh,
that choice, you know, making a decision that that choice isn't a healthy choice is not really our place. That's a very deep personal thing. It's like telling somebody they can't have the religion and worship the way they want to.
so what do you think happens to this character 5 or 10 years from the end of this film?
I have thought about it, and I think that I think that she continues to travel, but becomes more of a mentor, much like the man that
Hmm.
talked about his son dying. I think that she kind of rises through the ranks, not that there are any really, but also becomes a mentor for those that feel guarded and want that freedom.
Right, and she'll go on tour she'll go watch Fish travel around the country and see
Yeah.
all these rock bands.
So go to widespread panic and get some free burritos in the parking lot for kids that are just trying to get a ticket to the next show.
So here's Fern asked the young drifter, "Isn't there a girl somewhere?" I think Fern loved her husband so much that she's denying herself the possibility of connection again, which I think is very true. With her exchange with a young man, Fern is troubled that he is so lonely without love. And I think that is really true, that he does feel, that she's worried about the kid feeling lonely. I mean, the first time you see him, he's with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
But the second time you see him, he's by himself, just totally by himself.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on there. First of all, she sees hope in this young person that has the rest of his life ahead of him. And then she also sees somebody that feels that they're not good enough. And in some way, she would like to help fix that. Write a poem. Like, let me give you something to give to her so that you can have hope, or there's still time for you. I feel it is what she's not saying, which is what she's actually saying, because she's not saying it. I want to show my students, my acting students, this film because there's so much going on and what's not being said.
And there's so much, I think, from for an acting student and also for, a directing student about what you can do without any language at all. There's so many scenes where she's just walking or in the van, no dialogue at all, and they are just so evocative and so powerful.
Mm.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to tell us about?
Oh, Bart, it's been so much fun. I've just enjoyed that. I could do this every single week.
Well, we're
Um,
here every week.
Awesome. I'm going to tune in now. I'm a fan. So I do have a couple of things I'd like to mention. First of all, I am the author and the program director for Acting for Media and also Master Makeup Artistry at Media Tech Institute. It's also Recording Arts and Digital Film School. If you want more information on Media Tech, you can go to www.mediatech.edu. We have classes starting up in May.
Mhm.
And then also the Topaz Film Festival for Women in Film is coming up October 18th through the 24th.
Oh my gosh.
And
I just want you to realize that this, okay, so DocuFest will be like 2 weeks before that. The Dallas International Film
I
Festival is
know
going to
they
be the
just
same time.
announced like a week ago. And it's funny, I talked to James Faust
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago and he was like, we're moving our film festival and it's going to be in October. And we're all like, oh,
And
ah,
EarthX
how's
as
this
well.
going to happen? But anyway, we'll submissions are open now.
Yeah.
So the criteria for submissions basically is if you have a female that's in two of these roles or more, editor, producer, director, cinematographer, composer, that will qualify you to come and submit your film. And then the festival itself is October 18th through the 24th. The first Monday of every month, we have it's called M&M's. It's the monthly membership meeting, and it
It's
is
three
open.
M's, monthly membership meeting.
So there's an M and M's, the other two M's.
Two
Get
M's.
it?
Okay. All right.
M and M's.
Okay. All right.
Ah, I'm so smart. So anyway, we do that the first Monday of every month, and that's open to everyone. So this is where we try to get our members. We talk about our calendar. We get volunteers for the events that are coming up. If you want to learn more about Women in Film Dallas, you can go to www.wifdallas.org and go to our member benefits. We've got a ton of member benefits. It includes things like discounts off of your submissions for our film festival, discounts to the film festival, and any of our other events that we have going on during the year. We also have a couple of perks for members that put in a lot of volunteer time. We are producing a PSA. We'll have the Women's Expo coming up, which is a really great weekend where we have tons of panels and people coming and speaking on women's issues and the industry. And I guess, yeah, that's everything. You can get to me if you want to email me. I'd love to hear from you all. It was very nice to be in a room with you, Bart, a Zoom chat.
Yeah.
President of Women in Film Dallas. So go to the website, you can get to me there, or Tiffany at mediatech.edu.